Kamala Harris refuses to go quietly into the night. No, she absolutely has to continue to kind of trickle out, leak out all these little, it's everybody else's fault but Kamala's statements. And now we have a final reveal, apparently, on how everything fell apart on the Joe Rogan podcast, which she, of course, blames, just like everybody else, on losing the election. Now, first it was Doug Emhoff, her husband, who's now been banished to New York City. Then it was she didn't have enough money. $1.5 billion wasn't enough. Then it was that people don't like women, that people don't like black people, even though they voted for Obama twice. At no point has Kamala Harris looked inward at all. And now the left-wing media is starting to turn on her, but now even spinning that to try and blame Elon Musk. Vice President Kamala Harris wasn't performing well in softball interviews. By the way, this is from The Hill. As her sugar high faded in September and early October. But if she wanted to expand her support, and she needed to, she would need to reveal herself to tough questioning, open herself up to tough questioning. That's particularly important with men, specifically young men, who are not buying what she was selling. The obvious answer, Joe Rogan Experience. A late 90s sitcom star turned bro with a brain podcaster, Rogan boasted a subscriber base that amounted to a total eclipse of the genre's universe, with nearly 15 million signed up on just Spotify. His 2018 interview with Elon Musk during the Tesla and SpaceX founder enjoyed a joint and sipped whiskey garnered tens of millions of views on YouTube and crashed the next generation's car company stock. The vast majority of Rogan's guests, our listeners, were white men, presenting Harris with a potential golden opportunity to prove her mettle by walking into the lion's den. On October 11th, Harris' deputy campaign manager, Rob Flaherty, an aide in charge of digital strategy, made the first Zoom call to start negotiating with Rogan's reps. Now, as far as I've heard, Rogan required no negotiation. Joe Rogan was absolutely wanted her on, wanted her to be a part of the show, wanted her on. He said he would come in whenever. He would come in at 10 o'clock at night. He would come in at 6 in the morning. So all this is baloney. Made the first Zoom call start negotiating. He did not know what to expect. This might be some juiced up UFC-looking supplement people, he thought. He was surprised, perhaps disappointed, to find out that Rogan's associate were more like Hollywood agents. In that vein, they outlined the podcaster's conditions for an interview: no staff in the studio, no topic restrictions, and Harris would have to sign a waiver. There was one more item in small print. Harris would have to come to Austin, Texas. Rogan's reps said that might be negotiable, but he had only once done an interview with an out-of-studio guest, and that was Edward Snowden, who was wanted in the United States at the time. Along with fellow Harris campaign advisors, Stephanie Cutter and Brian Fallon, Flaherty offered up that Harris would be happy to talk about social media censorship, and other issues they thought would be most of interest to his listeners. From their perspective, it was a suggestion of possible topics, not an exhaustive list or exclusive list. But that's not what Joe Rogan wanted to talk about. Joe wanted to talk about the economy, the border, pro-choice, pro-life, one of his reps said, according to a person familiar with the negotiations. So, what's wrong with that? That's going to be tough, Flaherty said. We're only a few weeks out from the election. Harris had less than 0 reasons to be in Texas. It was not a swing state. Her campaign was flush with cash, so it made no sense for her to take off the trail to raise money. She was in a battleground or bust mode, plus a detour to Texas might smell like desperation to the press and a waste of money to donors. That is a cope. That is absolutely nonsense. Donald Trump sat and did what? A 3.5-hour interview with Joe Rogan, then got on a plane and went to a rally in Michigan. So it's not really quite the detour that they want you to think it is. Harris campaign chief. Oh, by the way, and also, Harris did not want. Oh, I missed a paragraph there. Sorry. After 2 Zoom sessions, Flaherty called Rogan intermediaries with an offer. Could Rogan join Harris in Michigan? He asked, proposing a date later in the week. No go. The Rogan team said after reaching out to the host on a week-long hunting trip, Austin or nothing. So it came down to her not wanting to travel, which is a lie. She didn't want to talk about the economy because she would look bad. She didn't want to talk about pro-life, pro-choice because she would look bad. She didn't want to talk about anything that would make her look bad, and that's why she didn't do the show. Harris campaign chief Jennifer O'Malley Dillon broke the impasse. Harris would be in Atlanta on October 24th with Obama and Bruce Springsteen. O'Malley Dillon said the campaign could fly her to Houston for a rally under the cover of visiting a state with one of her nation's most restrictive abortion laws. To put her in proximity to Austin, she dispatched an advanced team to the Texas State Capitol to do a walkthrough of Rogan's studio and was ready for Harris's arrival. She authorized her negotiating team to give Rogan what he demanded, an in-studio interview in Austin on October 25th. So that's new news, right? We didn't know at the time that this had actually been agreed on, and she pulled out. Rogan had Trump, for all former President Trump's work to reach apolitical voters through podcasts, YouTube, and other outlets, Harris positioned herself to score a coup by grabbing the biggest megaphone of them all. If she did, she would be exploiting the rift between Rogan and Trump. Rogan had called Trump a man-baby, a threat to democracy in 2022, vowing not to interview the former president. At the time, the beef was just one more sign of the social stigma attached to Trump after January 6th, said one-time, long-time Trump advisor. When Rogan appeared to endorse presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy in August, Trump fired back on Truth Social. It's going to be interesting how loudly Rogan gets booed the next time he enters the UFC ring. Well, he was never going to get booed. At the same time, Rogan was hardly Mr. Popular inside of Harris's camp. Her brother-in-law, Tony West, longtime advisor to Minion Moore, had argued against putting Harris on the podcast, especially after her first venture into politically tough terrain. An interview with Fox's Brett Baer in the middle of Rogan's negotiation absolutely bombed. There's no telling what Rogan might ask her or how he would treat her. Plus, his anti-woke crusade had made him a pariah on the hard left. They were overruled by O'Malley Dillon's crew, but not because the concerns were considered invalid. Even for those of us who were in favor of it, it was a close call, said one of the Harris advisors involved in the back and forth. By the way, these advisors are never going to work again. Like, these advisors are done, cooked. They are never going to work again. On October 10th, the day before Flaherty first spoke with Rogan's team, the Harris campaign weekly internal analytics assessment of the race, a 129-page document, had projected Harris winning exactly 270 electoral votes. She was on track to take the blue wall. That didn't happen. And Nebraska's 2nd district. But lose the rest of the swing states, at least according to her own analytics. That is also new information. Beneath the top-line numbers, though, the analytics showed that why it was so important for Harris to reach the type of voters who listen to Rogan. In battleground states, Trump led Harris by 10 points among men and trailed her by 9 points among women. According to the team's figures, if in both gender splits, Trump did 2 points better against Harris in the battlegrounds than in national polling. He led among young men, was tied with Hispanic men, and trailed her among young black men in a smaller margin than Biden beat him in 2020. Her aides scheduled the rally for Friday night in the fall of October 25 in Texas. It was as if no one else on the team knew that it was a night reserved for high school football. It was more sacred than Easter in the state. Campaign advisor David Plouffe responded to the criticism publicly, explaining that Harris wanted to shine a spotlight on the place where she believed Trump's policies had done the most damage to women. Only a few people knew the real reason. The whole reason the Houston rally was built was to put her in proximity with Rogan. The ongoing negotiations were touch and go. Flaherty had called his Rogan contacts on October 18th before the rally was set. We could do Friday the 25th, Flaherty said. Wish we'd known about this sooner because he has 25th blocked out for personal day, one of Rogan's reps said. What about Saturday morning? Only if it's before 8:30 a.m., came through the reply. The tone is different, Flaherty thought. The Vice President of the United States is offering to do your effing show. You keep putting up more hoops. Harris's team, sounds entitled to me. So it turns out ultimately they didn't like the entitlement. Mutual friends Elon Musk and Dana White had convinced Trump and Rogan to bury their dispute, according to Trump aide. there would be no Harris interview. I mean, are you kidding me? No Rogan, no freedom. The campaign kept its poker face, but it had played out its losing hand. Trump spent 3 hours with Rogan in an interview that instantly went viral. The contrast amounted to a traumatic event, one Harris said that he will never forget. But it wasn't quite over. Rogan would later blame the misconnection on Harris and accuse her of refusing to talk about weed, even though her platform included legalization. Harris aides made one final stab, offering to let Rogan talk with Vice President in Washington, D.C. The day after a closing argument speech at the foot of the White House, Rogan's team balked, citing the Austin-only condition. I mean, so she could have gone to Austin still. She ultimately was too afraid. She was too afraid to go into a place that wasn't going to softball her. That's what we know. Of course, the Daily Beast says how Musk kept Kamala Harris off Joe Rogan's podcast. So now the message is that it's Elon Musk and Joe Rogan's fault? I mean, are you kidding me? With Texas off the table, the book claims the Harris team concocted an elaborate excuse for why she would travel to the state. She had no chance winning in her campaign's final weeks. The rally's real purpose was to be close to Rogan so she could do her show, and that never happened. Response said only if it's before 8:30 a.m. Flaherty noticed the tone from Rogan's camp was now different. The same people who had previously seemed open to a Rogan-Harris interview, as long as there was no topic restrictions, were now less eager. At no point did they say no. At no point did they say no. Right? I mean, I don't think that Harris was left out to dry with her camp unwilling to make a second trip to Texas. I mean, I don't think. How is this Elon's fault? I'm confused. How did Elon do it? Just because he convinced him to drop his feud? Rogan at no point said he wouldn't interview her, so this is all just a lie. This article doesn't even mention Elon. Does this even mention Elon? Okay, in the title. Now, oh yeah, here. On how Elon Musk allegedly had a hand in all of it. But what was his hand? This doesn't... What? This is the wildest reach cope I've ever heard in my life. Well, keep losing, Kamala. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like on it. If you haven't yet, please subscribe or follow down below, and we'll talk to you again real soon.